Your brand may be staying on top of current trends, but are you agile enough to stay relevant, resilient, and successful as customers, competition, and the world continues to change at a breakneck pace? I'm thrilled to share the newly revised version of my first book, The Agile Brand. I'm calling it The Agile Brand Revisited. It's been updated to reflect our continually changing world, and it provides 7 principles that form the backbone of an agile brand, offering detailed insights and actionable steps for incorporating them into your business strategy. This is the book that started it all, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's now available in print and digital formats and available everywhere. Learn more by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com. Welcome to Season 5 of The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we talk with enterprise and technology platform leaders about the people, processes, and platforms that make marketing and customer experience successful, scalable, and sustainable. This is what creates an agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advisor and consultant for Fortune 1000 marketing and CX leaders and teams as principal and chief strategist at GK5A, and best-selling author, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and Agile certified coach. The Agile Brand podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To sign up for the Agile Brand newsletter and get the latest insights and articles on marketing technology and CX, or to purchase a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, go to gregkihlstrom.com. You can also find all my books on Amazon and other retailers. And now on to the show. Today we're going to talk about growing data maturity as an enterprise organization and how to build a culture of data. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Aron Clymer, founder and CEO of Data Clymer. Aron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this topic with you. Why don't we get started by you giving a little background on yourself and what led you to starting Data Clymer?
Sure. Yeah, I've always been interested in data one way or another. My career has been 25 plus years in B2B SaaS software. Mostly, I lived in the Bay Area for most of that time, and I was always working with data again one way or another through applications, standard databases. Got more into data warehousing, specifically in data and analytics in the early 2000s, and never looked back. So it started with me going to Salesforce and starting the data team there running that for about 8 years and developing a methodology I really liked for actionable data, essentially taking action on your data. And then I started this company that I'm running now, which I've aptly named Data Clymer. That's my last name, but it's a play on that word. And the idea is that we're helping our customers climb the mountain of data that they all have, and just getting the most value out of that data. So I've been doing this for 6 years. We're a consultancy and really enjoying it.
Nice. And so what kind of work does the consultancy do, and what kind of organizations do you work with?
Yeah, so we're solving that problem of not having enough data at your fingertips or available immediately to answer critical business questions. That's a common problem. I'm sure most of your listeners are sitting there going, yep, there's a lot of questions I just can't get answers to immediately. It might take me an hour or a day or a week, and that's just too long because I've got too many other things I'm trying to work on and I need to move forward. So we solve that problem by implementing cloud data warehouse systems that will centralize all the data you need in one place, make it analytics friendly, and then be able to consume it self-service. That's really one of the keys. So business users, non-technical users should be able to answer a lot of their questions in a self-service way with this approach.
Yeah, great. Well, yeah, so let's get started here. So we're going to start by talking about the modern data stack and how this affects organizations. So how would you describe a modern data stack? And, have there been any recent changes that might have affected this, very recently?
Yeah, there's some really exciting stuff happening right now. I just love being in this field because I think we're finally seeing technology able to really solve the problems that have been attempted to have been solved for 30, 40 years now in business. The modern data stack is, I would describe it as a full cloud, fundamentally different architecture to handling data, manipulating data, preparing data for business use, and then consuming that data. The same idea has been around again for 30, 40 years. The idea is, hey, I've got all of these different applications I'm running my business on, different business systems that has data about my customers, my product, my business. And it's really hard to analyze because it's stuck in those systems. It's not in one place. If I need to look at data from two different systems at once, it's just really hard to do if you don't have a data system to do that. On top of that, even the analytics capabilities that are inside these your business systems are usually subpar. That's been true for a long time. There's just not a lot of things they'll let you do. They'll let you do the basics, and they might have some things that work, but invariably you get stuck because there's some question you have, and the analytics within the source system just doesn't answer that question easily for you.
Yeah.
So bringing that data all together into one place so that you can then ask any question and manipulate the data into any form you need to get an answer is the name of the game. And that's been going on again for decades and decades in data warehousing specifically. So the whole idea of a data warehouse is you warehouse all your data and then you can do whatever you need to do. The problem has been for a long time, really performance. That's just been one of the biggest problems. Data has always been pretty big, despite this idea of we have big data now. We've had big data for a long time. And it's always been a problem because it's so high volume that one system, you usually can't handle it very well, or systems have not been able to handle it very well for a long time, which in the past led to very big data teams being required to keep a system up and running, to optimize performance. There was a lot of data modeling that would happen to take large volumes of raw data and winnow it down into small usable chunks that could actually be consumed by a dashboard or a report or an analyst.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of work.
Yeah.
On top of that, the technology would just fall over a lot of the time because it would run out of resources and it would scale out. Whereas today with the modern data stack, almost all of those technical problems have been solved. And that's what's exciting. It's like the same business case is there to, for the use of this, but all the technical headaches have really gone away. You don't have to spend 6 months now to design a system and make sure it's going to scale correctly. And you have enough servers or you have enough nodes or whatever, capacity you need to run a system, and you need to figure out how many users are going to be using it. A lot of that's gone away because the cloud has made resources essentially infinite. You can scale a system as big as you want. You can add as many resources as you need to make sure it performs. And the technology itself is really much more performant. So I really love this day and age where we can spin up a system very quickly in days, at least get it going. Now it's going to take always months to actually get a system that's going to work well for you because data is still complicated.
Yeah.
Like the complication of data hasn't gone away, but the technology has made it so much easier to get going. You can iterate now and just very, very in an agile approach data that way, rather than, again, these monolithic waterfall approaches that would take years in the past and take millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah. So is a lot of that predominantly driven by just cloud computing, how cloud has kind of changed the data landscape? What, are there other things that, if an organization's thinking about making some investments in their data stack, is it a move to the cloud? Is it, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah. So absolutely. Cloud has made this all available. So it's all cloud platforms that launched all of this innovation. And it started with Amazon Web Services, Snowflake, which is the largest, most successful modern cloud data warehouse system out there right now that we work with heavily, came on the scene about 10 years ago, built on AWS, right? So they were able to innovate on top of the cloud and make a product that was unlike any other data warehouse, solving all these technical issues I was talking about. Yeah. So yes, moving to the cloud has just created this huge amount of innovative new features. And so what that's done is not only solved all the problems I was talking about, these technical headaches and so forth, but it's opened the doors to whole new business applications that just weren't feasible before. Yeah. So that's another thing I wanted to get at with what am I excited about with the data and cloud and what's changing more recently, right, in the modern data stack.
Yeah.
And that is that Now that the data warehouse is in the cloud, it's fast, it's got all your data in it, and you can do all your standard reporting and analytics for sure. But because of the performance and the ability to handle so much more workloads, it's now companies are now really starting to drive their business on top of the data warehouse, and that's never really happened before. So right now, what we're seeing is a lot of companies saying, "Hey, I have my customer 360 in my data warehouse. It's the only place I have a really holistic view of my customer or my product. Now I actually want to leverage that data in my operations, my day-to-day operations, my marketing, my sales, my customer success, everything. I want to query that data and use it today for, let's say, a new marketing campaign." Well, so we're now pushing data back out from the data warehouse to those applications to then operate on top of it. And that's something that we call reverse ETL, or getting data back out of a data warehouse into a system. So that's one of the new innovations that's happening right now, or changes. And that's just going to move even farther forward in terms of full data applications that run directly off a warehouse. So it's fundamentally changing the sort of strategy of data warehousing.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to the next thing. You had mentioned self-service and things like that in the beginning of the show. And can you talk a little bit about, self-service, data democratization, and, obviously the cloud helps enable this because, to your point earlier, a lot more accessible, things like that. What does data democratization mean to the non-data people, like the marketers you just mentioned, as well as the data people listening out there? What does this enable?
What that means is that you, as a business user who is not necessarily technical, does not know SQL, doesn't really know how to access databases directly, can go to a cloud application that's easy to use, makes a lot of sense, and can quickly do a lot of the analytics yourself. So you don't have to go to the data team. You don't have to call up the analyst and say, "Hey, can you get me this data? And can you help me understand this problem?" You can do it yourself. So that's another thing I'm super excited about, is these cloud tools have just made it's really more about the usability, but the fact that the cloud tools make things so usable. And you can imagine with the cloud, I'll give you a couple examples. Not only is it just imagine a tool that is easy to use and you can get your answers quickly, that's great. But say you have your answer, well, now because it's cloud and it's just through your browser, you can copy that link, send it to 30 colleagues, and they can immediately see what you're seeing. So, sharing data is super simple. And again, performance is really high. So it's all really amazing.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that helps get away from the anecdotal thing where, a lot of marketers, a lot of CX people are listening to this show. You look at a number and it sticks with you at one point because data is so hard to access, or was so hard to access, it's hard for anyone to kind of verify or even, find a counterpoint or something like that. So to your point here, being able to share this stuff, having it be easily accessible, it points to kind of creating a culture of data instead of anecdotes or this happened this one time or stuff like that. So, to you, what does a culture of data mean, and how would you describe that?
Yeah, a culture of data is definitely the end goal here of everything we do. And that really just means that most employees, if not all of them, are using data on a daily basis to inform their job, inform whatever they need to do. And it becomes a regular thing. It just becomes integrated in the behavior. It's a habit, and it's been developed by most people, and it's talked about on a daily basis. So it's just top of mind all the time. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do. Behavior change is one of the hardest things you can do with human beings.
Yeah, definitely.
And the only way it's going to happen is if it actually works and it makes sense and it's actually really helpful. So all the things I talked about before, having high performance, being able to go into a system yourself, not being technical, ask a question, and not only just one question. In the past, let's say 10 years ago, your data team may have been able to get you a dashboard or a report, and that was a good first step because it got you some data, got you some visualizations, maybe it gave you a high level view of what's going on. But it was really hard to analyze that. You couldn't do that self-service. It was really hard to drill in.
Yeah.
If you're looking campaign performance across the past 3 months and you want to drill into this type of campaign and look at the individual campaign and then slice that by region and slice it by a zillion different dimensions, really hard to do in the past. But today, a marketer can go and just analyze, become an analyst really directly in a self-service way. And so that if they could do that, then you can see how they're going to go back to the well for more and more and more. And it can shift the culture to be more data driven.
Yeah. And I would imagine then, not because I think you're saying the same, not everybody is a born data analyst, but having broad access to it and having access to be able to look beyond a narrow slice of that information as well seems like it helps. I mean, and I think that's where like the democratization part comes in of like, again, it's not even just one person on a marketing team or some very specific team that has access to this. It's everybody can go in and dive and ask their own questions, right? Is that, do you see that as part of the power of this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And one of the ways you can start to help that along, it can be bottoms up and tops down. So from a tops down standpoint, a couple things you can do is start just requiring data to be brought to meetings, requiring that data is be brought to any, significant decision being made, and that you're supporting that with some of the data internally. And, everybody should be able to do that. Should be able to come to a meeting with the data they looked at directly and retrieve directly through an easy to use system.
Before we continue, let's take a quick break. If you're like many marketing leaders today, you're inundated with a need to improve the customer experience across an increasing number of channels and touch points, all while ensuring your team is performing well, innovating, and continuously improving. So how do you find the time to determine what's next for you, your team, your brand, and your customers? My company, GK5A, can help. Whether it is advisory services, evaluation of marketing technology platforms and solutions, or digital agencies and implementation partners, or assistance with creating strategic roadmaps and prioritization of efforts, we've done it all and served as an ally to Fortune 1000 brands in industries like financial services, healthcare, consumer electronics, professional services, and more. You can learn more about these services and contact us at www.gk5a. That's www.gk5a.com. Now let's get back to the show. So while I have somebody that works a lot in data here, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask some questions about AI, since that's on everybody's minds right now. So that's almost the obligatory set of questions here. But I definitely your experience and your insights. I want to get your take on a few things. So your previous experience, as you mentioned, included several years at Salesforce, leading the data team and some other organizations. It had you supporting hundreds of team members and providing them with intelligence. So with predictive analytics and modeling, how might some of that work that you were doing now years ago, how has some of that work evolved?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that is a really valuable piece of a full data strategy, is to include some sort of predictive modeling, machine learning, to be able to really get some insightful outcomes from your data, right? Could be actual models that you're running in production to predict, say, customer churn, could be customer acquisition. And amazingly, I still don't actually see that adopted very heavily internally, at least in small and medium-sized businesses. At the enterprise level, yes, there's enough resources and enough data scientists specifically, or machine learning engineers who are very specific, have a specific skill set of statistical modeling to be able to do that and run those in production. But I'm not seeing a lot of it yet. And there's a lot of tools out there and I think we're really close to being able to do that more and more.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen it. And with the generative AI that's come out more recently on the scene, that's a kind of a different animal. That's going to be really interesting. There's going to be tons of innovation here, and it's coming fast, but and it's hard for me to even predict where it's going to go exactly.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that it's coming out is a lot of the tools I mentioned, these self-service business intelligence tools. like one, just to give an example, one we work with a lot of is Sigma, called Sigma Computing. They're out of San Francisco, and they do work really well on top of Snowflake. And they are going to absolutely have a ChatGPT like feature integrated in there. So you can just ask, hey, what is my top performing campaign last week? Or who are my top 10 customers, for the last month, things like that. And it'll translate that into the data that, the query you needed to get to see that data. That's going to be across the board for sure. A lot of the human interface, is going to be made even easier because you can just interact with it just like you would with ChatGPT. The biggest challenge of that, though, is that the data is very specific. It's very, very distinctly defined, right? And so mapping that to human language is really hard.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the chat or the bot needs to understand that definition of everything. That's the biggest challenge. So these things are never going to be, they're not going to be 100% accurate. And that's one of the biggest challenges, because in data, you need it to be 100% accurate. And, in the sense that if you have the data and you ask it a question, let's say about sales, you need that sales number to be correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of different definitions of what sales is or what revenue is. And so all that stuff needs to be figured out. And the AI is going to have to be really aware of what it knows and what it doesn't know in a way, which it can do to some degree. But right now, I think it's going to be much more suggestive, and it's not going to be not going to give you maybe the final data set or answer you need, but it'll help you along the way to get to that answer.
Yeah. Well, and it certainly takes volumes of data and decisions made and all those things in order to make better predictions. I mean, do you think, with the larger companies, I think that's easier because they're, especially if you're a B2C company, you've got a lot of customer data and a lot of transactions and things like that. Maybe on the B2B side, it's a little less volume there. But with a smaller, medium-sized company or something, do you think some of the challenge is just lack of volume? Do you think it's a perception that they're more different than they think they're more different than they are? In other words, as far as, a prediction couldn't possibly take into account all of the variations, or, what do you think might be the barrier to some companies really getting started with this?
I think it's more confusion around the technology and what's needed. There are products out there, and I think they're just not widely adopted yet, but this is what we need. We need a product that's very similar almost to like a ChatGPT or one of these business intelligence tools like Sigma Computing, where you go and it's just very intuitive and easy to use. The same thing should be applied to predictive modeling, because at a high level, it's pretty easy to understand what a model should look like or what you're trying to get out of it. So an example, a very classic example is, say, predicting customer churn. So that's a big one. It's been around for many, many years. All you really want to do is ask your data system, hey, can you tell me the top 5 reasons people are leaving or my customers are leaving? That's what you're trying to get at. And the way that works under the covers, again, at a high level, is pretty simple. It only requires the system to understand what leaving means. So how do you define when a customer has left or churned? And then what are some of the possible data points you have that could explain that, right? And so the rest of it is all mechanical. It's all, okay, let's just define 5, 10, 15 different metrics that could explain customer churn. Let's run it through a regression model, and there's all sorts of pitfalls in the statistics, in the math, basically in the stats itself. But a system can manage that, right? It can figure out, well, in your case, if you ask that question, I can't give you an answer because you don't have enough data, and it could tell you that, right?
Yeah.
Or it can say, well, with your amount of data, here's the error range in the answer. The answer is, has a 20% error bar because you don't have enough data to get it down before, lower than that. Or it could tell you you said maybe these 3 things are predictive, but the data you have for those 3 things is so sparse that it's not quality. There's all these like quality checks that a piece of software could do for you. So we got to get to the place where all the technical headaches, just like in data warehousing, have been solved, and you can just ask that question and it'll tell you if you can or cannot get an answer.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. And so, there is certainly a lot of talk about things like ChatGPT gets a lot of the oxygen, I would say, but there's a lot of talk about many different aspects of AI these days. What do you think is not getting talked about enough that maybe businesses, leaders and execs should be thinking about a little bit more?
Well, when it comes to machine learning, AI, all that stuff, I think it's more about kind of what I was getting at with the accuracy of it, right? I would just be hesitant to think that we can just throw this technology on top of data and it's just going to work. For a long time, there's been one BI tool that has tried to do this called ThoughtSpot, where the whole idea was a natural language interface where you could just ask questions of your data and get these answers, and it'll help you and kind of prompt you through more and more filters and slices and dices of your data to get to your answer. And it's just that fundamental problem. That company has been very successful. However, there's a lot of work under the covers to get it to work well, because you have to really define your data and structure it in a way that's easy to consume and easy for the application to understand. It's going to be the same thing with AI. So I think the question is really that maybe we're not asking enough of is, what do I need to do to be able to actually get some value out of AI? Because there's still going to be a lot of prep work, if you will. So prepping data to make this right. And so there's a lot of things that still have to be done that we're not probably thinking about directly. I mean, we at Data Clymer are, because that's what we do, but an executive may not be thinking about the fact that there's still a lot of challenges to doing it right. And again, being able to have a distinction between what is the 100% accurate answer in the data and what is directionally correct, because the way you ask the question, led to not a perfect answer.
Right. So Aron, thanks so much for joining the show. I've got one last question before we wrap up here. So going back to the topic of data maturity and everything, what's one piece of advice that you would have for marketing leaders and other non-technology executives that they could do today to make a first or maybe a next step towards greater data maturity?
Yeah, so 100% it is to look at implementing a modern cloud data warehouse and a full stack to be able to do this stuff. And even that may sound intimidating, but the technology is so straightforward now that it's very easy to put that together and get it running. And the beautiful thing is, because of what I mentioned before about it being so flexible and agile, you can really approach it in a fully agile way. So you can pick off just one use case or one data set and keep it really simple to start. And, within weeks, you can probably have a solution that's getting you the answers that you weren't able to get before, or you're getting them much faster than you were able to get before. So what I would do is first map out a very specific business problem you're trying to solve. Go look at your OKRs, go look at goals that are really, really high, very important. And quickly, look at what kind of data you need to get an answer to those goals. What kind of KPIs do you need to, generate to get to an answer? And, in a lot of cases, those KPIs will only require one or two data sources to get the data, to generate the KPI. Yeah. And you can do that. So you can do these small little bite-sized projects that don't take a huge amount of effort or time and see the value quickly. And then you can iterate, and you can just keep iterating, for a long time. But it's really nice that you can approach it in this agile approach these days.
Yeah, it's great. Well, again, I'd like to thank Aron Clymer, founder and CEO at Data Clymer, for joining the show. You can learn more about Aron and Data Clymer by following the links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkihlstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. To get a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, visit my website, or you can find it on Amazon or other retailers. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.